I wonder if you and I might have something in common. I suspect that we probably do, maybe more than one thing. But what I'm thinking of right now is that you and I both might agree that there's things in our lives we would like to see differently. Some of those things might be situations, many different areas of our lives, of course. Specifically today, I'd like to talk about the possibility that maybe you would like some person in your life to change. Now, I can think of examples myself, and we probably have good reason why we might like to see somebody change. Maybe it's even ourself, actually, that we're thinking of. But today, I'd like to bring our attention to not just ourself, but to some individual other than ourself that we would like to change. Let's start there anyway. Now, whether it's from the past, the present, or the future, you can probably think of somebody who should have done something differently, maybe very differently, that directly affected you or indirectly so. Did they hurt someone that you love? Did they misunderstand you? Maybe they abandoned or hurt you, maybe severely. Maybe you carry harsh feelings from what you've seen or how you've been treated. You might have resentment towards this person, so many different feelings. You could have anger, unforgiveness. This could be toward maybe an offender, a perpetrator, toward a parent or caregiver who didn't prevent things from happening to you. Or maybe they didn't believe you that those things happened in the first place. This can leave us feeling so many different things. Fear, fear that it's going to happen again. Regret, maybe we wish we would have handled things differently. Or not let it happen in the first place if we could go back and just change it. So we have maybe regrets about we think we should have worked up some superpower to be able to do things differently. Maybe we have shame. Shame for how we feel about ourselves. Even though it wasn't us necessarily that did anything wrong, but we can still internalize these things and we can direct this toxic shame inward towards our own self. So why is dealing with this so hard? And what can we do with this heartfelt desire just to make things better? That's all we want, right? Well, any feelings that you have about others or yourself, they're understandable. Even if they feel off or wrong or painful. See, as human beings, we're capable of having a whole variety of emotions and thoughts, whether they're good ones or ones we might call bad ones. That's what happens being a card-carrying member of the human race. We're capable of these things, and it can hurt. And actually, your own pain is a major guide within you. See, our pain, even though it hurts, is a valuable guide. It's like a compass. It's prodding you to take action, to stay safe, or to preserve your very life. Now, sometimes what those emotions are telling us to do might not be healthy things, but there is something that feels threatened within us. And so that's why they can feel so awful. I've got to take more measures to stay safe, to stay well, to preserve myself, or I'm just afraid that I can't, or I don't even know what I'm afraid of or what I'm angry about. It can be so confusing having all these emotions fly around within our person. And then there's the question about, well, okay, what am I supposed to do with them? You know, even if I can say, okay, I know what's there, well, yeah, but what do I do about it? I've got these thoughts and emotions just taking up space in my psyche without paying rent. And I have these persistent reactions. What am I supposed to do when they keep returning? Maybe they eventually leave us feeling exhausted or angry, hopeless, lonely, vulnerable, scared. Who knows what? Maybe it can even shake our faith to the core. Maybe we even wonder if we belong here anymore. We can go to such dark places. And yet at the time, even though we might know it's a dark place, it might feel like the only place that we can go is towards darker and darker places because, well, we probably feel trapped and stuck. Like maybe there's just not any other options. And even worse, we're less effective at making changes, even if we do come up with an idea of maybe I could try something, and maybe we have tried things to change a person in our lives. And yet we might try things and it flies back in our face. I don't know if you've ever tried to change a loved one, maybe a family member, anybody close to you and see how that goes. It often doesn't go so well, does it? You think, okay, I just want things to be a little bit better. The metaphor in the mental health field, when we talk about family systems, well, we talk about this metaphor of there being a mobile hanging over a baby's crib. And this mobile is made of multiple pieces. It's got these little pieces, they're kind of cute, and they're all hanging almost like a little chandelier. And you think, wow, what if you look at one of those and think, hey, I wonder what's on the other side of this little one on this whole big, series of these things. What if I move this little one? I just want to see what the back side of it is. So you go to tap it to turn it around. But instead of that little one turning around, the whole thing kind of wobbles, right? And the whole thing is in this weird motion. It's all just turning and wobbling and moving in ways that you can't even predict. It's like, no, I just wanted to look at this little one. So you touch it again, and now it moves a whole other way. And you're like, okay, I just want to see the other side of this one piece. Is that so hard? And so that's like a family system, because a family system has different family members, different relationships in the family, and maybe you try to get to know one person, or you make a suggestion, or they just do something, and they try to get something to, maybe some pain to ease up, right? Maybe they think, well, okay, I'm frustrated with my dad, so I'm going to go talk to him. And it doesn't go the way he wants. Now other family members get wind of it, and they're like, wow, now they have a misunderstanding of how that whole communication went. They're trying to figure out who was right, who was wrong. It just turns into an instant nightmare. And it doesn't have to be of major serious things. This can just happen, right? And so it's so confusing, because we just try to get something to change. We just try to get something to happen that we think is good in our estimation, or at least less bad, hopefully. And we try it, and it just seems to bounce back in some unpredictable manner. And the very relationships that we want to improve, it seems like it either throws it in some random direction, maybe it makes it worse. What in the world is going on with this, right? It's so confusing, and it can be so frustrating. Well, just as a family system has many moving parts, there's a thing in the mental health field called our internal family systems. What that means is you and I are each individually made of many different parts. It's much like a family within ourselves. It's like an internal family. And these relationships among the different parts make it even more complicated. Sometimes when I step back and think about, what it takes to get through a day of life, or getting through a week, a month, a whole lifetime, it's amazing this thing ever works out even a little bit, right? It's just everything gets so complicated. And it's not the way, it doesn't feel natural. Something doesn't line up because we put our natural responses in. And maybe when we do that, it even doesn't go like we want it to. Maybe we say something and think, no, that's not really what I meant. Or people take it in a way that we would have never dreamed. It's tough. Long story short, it can be really tough, right? But we can't just acknowledge that and say, yep, it's tough, and move on. It doesn't answer the questions of what to do. Now, we can feel stuck because of this. Because what do I do when everything that I try seems to bounce back in some unpredictable or undesirable way? It's not easy, is it? But of course not. But we have to do something, because if we don't do anything, it doesn't mean it all goes away, of course. Now, to top it all off, we can't even make people change. We've got some misunderstandings that we're not effective. We're not as effective as we would hope to be. Okay, so you throw this into the puzzle. People might not be affected as much as we would like them to be, but we are also not as effective. So you might think, okay, yeah, I want this relationship to go better. I want this person to change. Sure, I've got changes to do too, but I want them to change. It's just something I need them to do. Well, the fact is, we really can't make people change. That's the first principle of why we're ineffective, is because you can't make somebody change. You really can't. And when we do affect change in a person, it's often not the way we'd like it to be, like that mobile. Oftentimes you might notice it's easier to have a negative impact on someone than a positive one, right? Or if it is a positive one, it doesn't seem to stick. And they're happy about, oh, you're an amazing person. But what does that bring about in them that is a change that you feel like you really would like to see from them or for their own sake? So it just feels it can feel futile, right? So we can't make people change. And when we do, it's not often the way intended. And then even let's say that it is the change you want. Well, here's the topper. Here's the real kick in the head, right? Is that even if we get the change that we think we want so badly, it might not be as great as we think it would be. Now, finally, I got something to go the way that I wanted, right? Why is it so disappointing? Why is it so unsatisfying? It's because who are we? Who are we to think that that change that we desire so much for another person is going to be what they need to make in the first place? Oftentimes it doesn't roll that way. It's not the way that it goes. It's not what's in the cards. So when we try to do this, we try to accomplish something, then even if it does have that outcome, it's maybe not as great as we thought it would be. And let's say that it's not even that. Let's add another icing to that top layer. Let's say that they do make the change and we think it's pretty cool. Well, where's the reward for the change? If somebody makes a change that we want them to make, is it really going to stick? What is selling them on the idea that it should be there in the first place? If they're changing because of us, it's probably going to be short-lived. They're probably not going to believe it in the first place. And then when it comes to fruition and maybe they try to make some efforts, it's probably not going to fit with them naturally. And so it's not going to stick. If it does stick, then it may or may not have been because of us in the first place. And if it was, excellent. You might have found that 1% where, hey, that was good, right? It's kind of like an alcoholic can stop drinking and you think, hey, yay, they gave it up. Well, there was reasons they were drinking in the first place, and it might not just have been chemical, physical dependence. If it was more than that, even if it wasn't more, but especially if it was more, then the original issues that led them to drink in the first place now are flying to the surface left and right. So you've got a dry drunk on your hands, or maybe it's your own self, and it hurts now even more raw. Hurts even worse, right? Why is that? Well, because the person had reasons. Not that they were good, not that the alcohol was good, but it doesn't really matter. It just is what it is. That's what they chose to do, and they were doing it because they were motivated, because it may have been somewhat alleviating some symptoms to an extent. And to them, that might be the best shot at how they know how to address some of the underlying pain. So if you take that away, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but when we do, now they've got possible withdrawal, partly what do I do with my life now that I quit, and whoa, there's the issues that were there in the first place staring me in the face. So now oftentimes the change that we think we want in a person, even if it does happen, it can have unintended consequences and just not turn out like we want. So why am I talking about all these things? What's the real point of this? The point is that we sometimes fixate on changing other people, and it's a poor goal. See, God has a model for this. The Holy Spirit wants us to change all the time. But how does he handle it? It's not through just making us change. What else does he do? And why is that better? Right? And isn't there anything is there really anything that wrong with wanting change? I mean, we can see how good it is. But at the end of the day, is there really anything that we can do with these reactions that we have? And does it really tie in with God, or is he just infinitely far away, like too far to hear our cries for help? Do we have a reason to hope? Because if the people that I love and that I want to be closer with, if there's a brick wall standing in the way and I can't get closer with them, or I can't achieve goals, or I have to watch them not achieving their goals, or falling into despondency or despair or anger, whatever it might be, isolation, whatever, that feels pretty stuck to me, right? So how do we get unstuck from that? Because we know that God doesn't really want us to be stuck, right? He didn't create us with that in mind. He didn't say, I'm going to create Jeff and he's going to be stuck every minute of his life. No, he doesn't want that. He's the author and finisher of our faith. Okay, so there are things that we can do, and we can keep our self and our faith and our hope intact. You can do something. You don't have to be stuck with these feelings. Okay, but there's good news and there's bad news about this. See, the bad news is here's what we can't do. Let's start off with those. A lot of things that we can't do. Among them, I'm going to list a few of them here. Well, you can't fix yourself. Okay, that might not be news to you because you've tried, but chances are you're probably still trying, right? And the reality is you can't fix yourself. We could say a whole lot more about that, but what's another thing? Well, you also can't fix someone else. Like, ouch. Okay, I can't fix myself and I can't fix anyone else. That's no fun. All right. So to just add fuel to the fire here, there's other things. You can't change anything that's ever happened, ever. I've tried to go back in time. It doesn't work very well. I haven't found a way. Maybe you will. Maybe you know how to. I don't. I don't think any of us do. So can't change anything that's ever happened. It's not gonna be effective. And even right now, you can only change a little bit at this moment of your life. Making a little bit of change is really hard. So there's precious little that you can change. And you can't predict the future. You know, we try to figure things out, make our path ahead. You can't predict the future. So even that's limited. There's just not a lot that's within our ability and our control. Now, this bad news, I say it because it really isn't bad news at all. It's not bad news at all. How can it not be bad news that we're so restricted and confined and that we almost can't do anything ourselves? It's because if that's the reality, stop trying. Stop trying to do the impossible. Stop trying to carry burdens that aren't yours to carry. That's not the path to freedom. That's not the gospel. My yoke is easy, my burden is light, Jesus said. If we take up another person's cross, he doesn't say do that. He says, take up your cross and follow me. Jesus took his own cross, and it bore the weight of all of our burdens and sins, right? But he didn't take our crosses. There are burdens for us to carry, but it's not for the forgiveness of sin. He took that on his shoulders. He didn't ask us to do it because we can't. He said, take up your cross daily. So these things are not bad news. It's actually liberating. It's actually freeing. No matter how much you want to, you can never do these things, so stop trying. But then again, what can we do? Because life isn't just filled with what we can't do. What can we do? Maybe we still want to see change in our own lives or other people. Isn't there something we can do? Yes. And this is the rest of the good news. You know, in the Bible, the word gospel means good news. When they were spreading the good news about Jesus, that is the gospel. So just as the bad news really isn't bad news after all, the good news doesn't always feel good, but it is. Simply put, there's really only one thing you can do. Now, there's different facets to this, but there's one thing that you can do. If you can't control, what can you do? You can seek. You can seek that place where you belong most in your relationship with the Lord. Now, this isn't literally just one thing. It's an umbrella term that you can always return to when you lose your focus. You see, instead of making someone change, including yourself, we need to let go. And we need to hold on loosely to what we can't control. So we can hold on to certain things, but hold loosely, not with a stance that I will make this go the way that I see fit. Probably not going to happen. Instead, it's our own holding on that causes the pain in the first place many times. See, there's pain and there's suffering, but we can't always remove the pain of life, but we can remove certain parts of the suffering, the needless suffering, the suffering that we don't need to engage in. That is the low-hanging fruit. That is what we can address. And we do this by seeking, because there's one thing that we can hold on to, and that one thing is God's promises. So does the Bible really point us toward healing in this life of such real pain and suffering? Yes. And here's just a few truths. I wanted to just share a couple of verses, but they have to do with seeking and why it's so important. All right, so in Matthew chapter 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. Ask, seek, knock. Think of ASK, ask, seek, knock. That's the ask approach. Ask. We do all three of those things. In the middle of those, seek. Right? And we must seek with our whole heart. He says in Jeremiah 29:13, God says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." This might not be a one and done. This is a process. This is for life, right? Push through, push hard. The kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. He's not talking about angry, bitter violence against each other. He's talking about be rugged with your faith, like they used to call it the old rugged cross. Well, be rugged with your faith. Grab on, hold on, be tenacious. Faith is not wimpy. Faith is not for the faint of heart. Faith is not blind, right? It's beyond what we can see. It's not what we can't see at all. It's what we can see with more than our eyes. Desire him like nothing else you've desired before. Stay thirsty, my friends, right? Let there be only two options and only two, and you'll find one of them. One option is, I've sought him completely without reservation, and he never found me. I never found him. Nobody else could point me in a direction where he can be found my whole life. Or, I sought him completely, and I found him, and I'm forever touched by him. One of those two options will reveal themselves. I know which one it would be if you seek him wholly. W-H-O-L-L-Y, holy. Romans 12. I urge you, brothers and sisters, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. He doesn't say renew your mind. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How's that happen? Seeking him. But is seeking him really the only thing that we can do? There's so much more action to be taken, right? There's so many more options that we can take. The simple truth is this. You can't make anyone or anything change for the better, not even yourself. Any positive effort that you ever give came from God who created you. If you want more strength, wisdom, and guidance, seek the one who it all comes from. Any wisdom from any book or any person that helps you, well, guess what? That also came from God. Whether that person knows it or not, it came from God. If you want to stand the best chance of influencing someone, or to make better choices, or treat you better, then seek the Lord so he will guide you to the best place of doing so. One more example. Adam and Eve, they were told by God not to eat the fruit of knowledge. They were told by the serpent to eat the fruit of knowledge and gain knowledge, which it actually was an option. That was an option. But there was a third option that existed when they had doubts. You see, they could have done something else besides either just choosing, well, do we eat of the fruit, or, well, do we not eat of the fruit? What else could they choose? To seek God. They could have used the ask approach. Ask, seek, knock. They could have gone to him, sought his counsel, his wisdom, his opinion, even if they still disagreed, even if they thought he was going to say something that they weren't sure of. They could have still asked him. But they didn't do that, and instead they brought sin and death into the world. They weren't trying to be evil, but they did sin. Sin simply means missing the mark, right? That's all it is. And we have all sinned. So that's what potentially keeps us out of heaven, right? There can't be any unforgiven sin. Well, there can't be any sin in heaven. We can't take it in with us, and the sin that we have needs to be washed away and forgiven. So missing the mark that we're talking about is God's presence and his ways. Now, they had those, but they actually forfeited them, and they turned a different direction. And so that's when it became a problem, because they chose not to follow his word. And instead, they followed someone else's word. They still could have taken their question and fears to him, but they didn't. So they ended up hiding in their pain, in their shame, and in their fear. And God never told them to hide, did he? He didn't. This is what we do. You know, it's a natural thing to want to hide, retreat, isolate, and, you know, we need to break the cycle. We need to seek God first above all else. We've got this drive to run away from him, to either be angry or ashamed, hide, and that's because that's the flesh. And the war is between the flesh and the spirit. They're both at war with each other. So we're faced with this battle, and that's part of our lot in this life because it's been infected with the ways of sin and brokenness. Now, we can do things to break the cycle. We can seek God first above all else. And the ways to do that are, for example, learn God's word and his promises. What does he say that we can expect from him? What does he say he expects from us and doesn't expect from us? Similarly, surround yourself with others who are more mature than in their faith than you are. And this is powerful. This is huge because we need that. This is the network that we need to form. Iron sharpens iron. This is how it's supposed to be. And we can also never stop desiring him ever. The seeking doesn't just occur when we have a problem, a question, a fear. It can, but it can also be ongoing because he is infinite. He's got more to offer us no matter how much we press in because we're finite and he's not. So he can offer more than we can even understand, more than we can receive, more than we can remember, more than we can absorb. He has more. He can give abundantly to what we need, right? It's not a problem for him. So as we grow, another thing we can do is follow the wisdom of his word and that the Spirit gives you. The Holy Spirit will give you wisdom. It says that right in James 1:5 and multiple other places. When you're in doubt, what if your instinct switched from being running from him to running to him? That's a pretty good change. That's part of the seeking process. That is the seeking process. Because remember, seek and you shall find when you seek with your whole heart. That's the key to this whole thing. Had they trusted God, Adam and Eve would have followed their heart's desire to honor him, and everything might have been radically different, not only for them, but all of mankind. I believe it would have been. And so things didn't go that way. But if they would have, we have good reason to believe that it would have been dramatically different. All right, what about our pain and trauma? Don't we need to do something? Sure. But how does seeking address even part of our pain and trauma? What's that like? Well, in 1 Peter 5:7, it says, cast all your anxiety on him. And it adds, to fill in the blank, it says, because he cares for you. He's not just somebody that we can take these to. He is. But why? It's because he cares. He's got you. He's got this. And he's got us for eternity. So nothing that happens in this life can take us away from that if our heart is connected with him. And that's up to us. And our heart can stay connected with him by seeking him. There's no fear in love. 1 John 4:18 says, there's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Okay, that's missing the mark. When we're living in fear, we're missing the mark of his love, which is the bullseye, and we're letting some of these lies and the knowledge of good and evil still affect us because we can't unsee what we've seen. We can't forget everything that's happened in our lives. So, of course, we're going to be having these memories, these experiences in our history, or maybe in the present, or maybe in the future in this life. But if we can love and have his perfect love at the core of everything, well, now that's a game changer. Because now it's one thing for fear to come up. You can't really control if fear bursts on the scene, but you can control dramatically how you respond to it. And that's what he's talking about. So he doesn't say there will be no fear, but it says perfect love drives out fear. It's amazing. So in Hebrews 4:16, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence. Why? So that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Incredible. Back in the Psalms, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. So the tents is a safer place. The tents they're more secure. That's where the beds are. That's where the comfort is. The courts, that's less protected. It's close by, but it's not really in the wheelhouse. It's not in the more intimate place, right? Where you sit and have the full presence of each other. But he's saying, I'd rather be out in the courts, right? If it means that I get to be in God's courts, I'd rather be there than in the full-on tents of the wicked. So let me just be a doorkeeper. I'll be anything, right? Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:24. Run in such a way as to get the prize. Don't worry about other people running the race. Because you know what? It's your race. Heaven's big enough for however many people make it. Don't worry about it. It's not in our pay scale to figure that out. What is in our pay scale is to run. What's running? Seeking. We're running towards Him. That's the race. And the peace of God, it says in Philippians 4:7, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. There's a promise. That is a solid promise. So how are you going to seek Him today? Because that's what this is all about. It's not just about, in theory, that's a good idea. It's not just a religion. This is life and death. Not just for this short time frame that we live in, but for eternity. That's where you can begin right now, is this moment. It's where we all begin. All we have is right now. That's all we have. This is the only moment you have, so I encourage you to use it wisely. This moment is when we set the stage for how much healing we're ready to receive in the future moments of our lives. May your future reveal all the healing the Lord wants for you, which is even more than you want for yourself. God bless.